All right, cool. So a bit of a breakdown of some of the kit we've got from a recording perspective here in the control room. So behind me we have trusty Cadac console. This one's from the late 90s, I believe. A lot of history behind this guy. Firstly, it weighs a ton, as you would expect from this old analog console. But the history of it, it was made by a company called Cadac that actually did a lot of work for the National Theatre. And Andrew Lloyd Webber went to a show at one of his theatres and said the sound was awful. And so tasked a chap called Anthony Waldron to come up with a better solution for consoles for, you know, theatre and performance, and he designed and built this guy. And so they're actually quite rare and hard to find now. We went for it because it does sound awesome. The preamps are great, EQ section's great, and it's just a beautiful thing. So we've got a 18 track console here, which we use for tracking everything in the live rooms. From that, we can break out into loads of analog equipment. Many things are great about this console. One of them being though, it's modular, which means that even when it's on, you can remove a channel strip if you need to get it repaired or replaced or anything like that. But some of these are mono, some of them are dual mono, some have different EQs, and you can just configure it to however you want to configure it, which is a great feature. But what I mainly use the console for, other than tracking, is you can probably see these faders lighting up here. It allows us to do something called analog summing. Now, I've seen the videos as well. Some people say analog summing is a myth. I, however, can hear the difference. And in the future, we're going to put up some videos doing some A/Bs between the two. In a nutshell, what analog summing is, yes, we're recording into the computer. We might have 100 tracks on the computer. And then if you render out that track to WAV or MP3, it's the computer which is turning all of those tracks into audio going 011, 00111. But what we can do with the console is send all of the groups from the computer back into the analog console. So all the analog circuitry puts that into a stereo file. And what that does, it gives you a warmth and kind of a 3D texture, which you might not be able to get with digital. So that's another great reason why we love using this old girl. Little bit of nerdery on some of the individual bits of analog kit we use here at the studio. First of all is the Neve 1073 mic preamp and EQ. So we've got two of these racked up. Those that know the Neve 1073 is like the classic mic preamp. Common in a lot of the studios you'll see around the entire world, but it's also got an absolutely wonderful EQ section, which is really broad, and you can make some really broad sweeps to really change the sound with the Neve 1073. Absolutely fantastic preamp and EQ. Next up, for us, this was pretty much one of the holy grail bits of kit that we wanted to get in the studio, and it's called an LA2A optical compressor. Optical compressors are glorious things because they're dead easy to use, for one. How they work is there's no attack or release settings or anything like that you might find with what's called a FET compressor or something like that. It reacts to whatever's going into it. So you get a real smooth, warm compression. It's fantastic on vocals, it's fantastic on bass. It's just a real nice, gluey, warm compressor, and we love it. Next on the hit list, we have a pair of Empirical Labs Distressors. So again, those that know will know. Absolutely wicked pair of compressors. Ironically, as soon as you power these guys up, they default to what's called the Nuke setting, which will give you an idea of what they're trying to do here. It does everything from gentle compression to blow your face off compression. Typically, I'll use it on drums. Sometimes I'll use it on bass to smash the living hell out of them, and it sounds wicked. It sounds really good. These ones also have what's called the Brit mod, so you can smash the hell out of stuff even more. Then moving it down towards the bottom, first of all, we have our patch bay, our Bantam patch bay, which allows myself and other engineers that might want to use the space to patch in and out of all of this outboard gear in either a hybrid or analog or whatever way they wish to. But below that, we have our converters. So this is what turns the analog into digital to go into the computer and send it all out to all this equipment. And we use the Universal Audio Apollo setup. Absolutely fantastic AD conversion. Very common in a lot of studios, and touch wood, never let us down and sound great. All right, so next up we've got what's called a bus or a stereo compressor, but I call it a bus compressor, from a company called Heritage Audio. This one's called the Successor. Typically, I'll stick that on the end of the mix just to glue the whole mix together. It's also got transformers in it, which warm up the sound. Similar to the Distressors though, you can max it out to get some pretty gnarly sounds also. So it can be used for either subtle compression or gnarly compression. Next up, we have a mono compressor from Universal Audio. This is called the 1176. Really cool compressor, this one. Tend to use it on vocals or bass or any sort of mono information. Cool thing about this compressor though was there was a British engineer. He discovered that you can press in all of these ratio buttons at the same time, and it's known as all buttons in mode, and it was a mistake. It's not meant to do that, but they figured out you can do that, and if you do that, you create some crazy sounds, and it's awesome. Next up is this beast. Not many people are too aware of this company, Oram. So it's a guy called John Oram, who actually I think back in the day was associated with Vox, the guitar amplifiers, and was involved, I believe, in the Vox AC30, which is like a classic guitar amp, which all the indie bands used back in the 90s and stuff, like Suede and such bands. But he went on to do audio equipment, and this is I guess it's a mastering EQ. Hard to find. This one I believe is from 2001, and I spoke to John about it actually, because I've got hold of him on Facebook, and he's a really knowledgeable chap and he likes talking about stuff. The reason this unit's so special, not only is it a great sounding EQ, but it uses something called group delay, which is where if you push the low end or the high end, what it does inside the unit is actually delays the low end and the high end by like a millisecond. All analog circuitry, and that again creates width and depth you just can't get really within a plugin. It's a really cool bit of kit. And then to wrap up the analog showdown, we've got the SSL Fusion, which is a company called Solid State Logic. What the Fusion does, it's like it's a master of all tricks really, because what you can do with it, you can push saturation and harmonics into it. That can go into a really nice EQ section. You've also got a high frequency compressor in there, which kind of mimics tape compression. You can also narrow or widen the stereo image of your mix with it, but also you have a transformer button, which yet again gives it a bit more vibe to the sound. I pretty much put every stereo mix through that just to give it that little extra 10%.